Welcome to the Insomnia Coach podcast. My name is Martin Reed. I believe that by changing how we respond to insomnia and all the difficult thoughts and feelings that come with it, we can move away from struggling with insomnia and toward living the life we want to live. The content of this podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only. It's not medical advice and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease, disorder, or medical condition. It should never replace any advice given to you by your physician or any other licensed healthcare provider. Insomnia Coach LLC offers coaching services only and does not provide therapy, counseling, medical advice, or medical treatment. The statements and opinions expressed by guests are their own and are not necessarily endorsed by Insomnia Coach LLC. All content is provided as is and without warranties, either express or implied. Like many people with chronic insomnia, Eric found that the more he tried to make sleep happen, the more difficult it became. Although he didn't have any real issues falling asleep, he would regularly wake during the night and find it hard to fall back to sleep. His mind would start racing and he would experience a lot of anxiety. Eric found himself getting obsessed with sleep. He was thinking about it all the time, and no matter how hard he tried to relax and no matter what he tried, things just didn't improve. When we started working together, one of the first changes Eric made was to reduce the amount of time he allotted for sleep to more closely match the amount of sleep he was getting at the time. This allowed him to rediscover the sensation of sleepiness rather than fatigue, and that proved to be both reassuring and motivating. Eric also started to respond to nighttime wakefulness in a more workable way. Instead of tossing and turning all night, trying to make sleep happen and trying to relax, he decided to draw instead. This helped make wakefulness a bit more pleasant and helped train his brain that wakefulness wasn't a threat that it needed to be alert at night to protect him from. Finally, Eric committed to doing things that mattered to him, to live the kind of life he wanted to live, independently of sleep. Eric experienced rapid improvements in his sleep as he changed his response to insomnia and all the difficult thoughts and feelings that come with it. He no longer takes sleeping pills, and today, more than 1.5 years after we worked together, Eric is no longer engaged in a daily and nightly battle with his mind, and he continues to sleep well. A full transcript of this podcast and an accompanying video can be found at insomniacoach.com/podcast. So, Eric, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come onto the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on. I'm really looking forward to everything that we're going to end up talking about today. So let's just start right at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit more about when your sleep problems first began and what you think may have initially triggered that sleep disruption?
It was the spring of 2020. So this is like, when the beginning of the COVID hysteria and stuff. And I think I had some anxiety, like some health anxiety. I tried not to get caught up in all that stuff, but yeah, I think, I don't know. I kind of have a tendency to be a little bit of a hypochondriac anyway, so that probably didn't help. And I remember it was starting to interfere with my sleep. I wasn't sure what was going on. I remember talking to my doctor about it, and at some point I started focusing more on the sleep, I guess, because I just was like, I got to get some sleep. Like, this is ridiculous. And once I started worrying about that all the time, then it just got worse. And like the harder I tried, like the worse I got. It seems like once you start going down that path, it just like kind of like it's a snowball effect or something. It just gets worse. Like the harder you try.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you feel it was all that kind of stress, worry, anxiety related to the pandemic that triggered that initial sleep disruption?
Yeah, I mean something like that. I mean, I remember someone that I knew had recently passed away suddenly, and I think I had
Mm,
that on my mind too. But yeah, I think that was more or less how it got started.
yeah. And so, what was that sleep disruption like for you? Is it, just at a basic level, was it difficulty falling asleep, or was it kind of staying asleep once you first fell asleep, or well, maybe it was a bit of both of those things?
I think, yeah, I don't. I think I was okay with falling asleep, but yeah, I would always wake up in the middle of the night, and yeah, then that's when it would start to get weird. Um, yeah, like I think later on, maybe it was a little of both, but initially, yeah, it was more an issue with sleep maintenance.
Yeah. So when you fell asleep and you woke up and then you found it hard to fall back to sleep, why do you think that was the case? Like, was there like loads of stuff just racing through your mind, or did it just seem to be like no obvious cause for what was going on?
Yeah, there was. I definitely, yeah, I remember just yeah, a lot of stuff in my mind, and like just remember feeling weird, because like I said, it's kind of a hypochondriac, and so anything if I just felt sick or at all, I would just start imagining things, and I'm like, I don't know what, am I gonna, you know, like what's wrong with me, and then um, yeah, I remember like getting the chills, like for some reason, like and then just like having this like weird breathing issue or something. It's just like weird stuff like that. But I think I was just having like anxiety, like a anxiety attack. And then yeah, like that's when I would just be up for sometimes hours, just trying to relax.
And so, what about your days? Were you finding that there was any kind of knock-on effect on your days related to all this struggle with sleep and all that wakefulness during the night?
Yeah, once it became an ongoing issue, um, yeah, I mean, in some ways, it seems like the days were worse than the nights because I just be thinking about it all the time. I became obsessed with it, which I think is happens to people with chronic insomnia. You become kind of OCD about all this stuff, and yeah, I mean, and this is I know something that you talk about a lot is like the way you react to insomnia. Really has a big effect on you know whether or not it becomes a chronic problem. And yeah, I definitely didn't respond well to it.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that like every other human being on the planet, you've experienced some difficult nights from time to time before this longer term struggle with sleep. When when you were going through this, when you first experienced that sleep disruption, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but my guess is you at first you're just like, well, there's probably the reason why I'm struggling is because everything that's going on right now. Normal, this has happened before. But when did you get to that point where you started to think, this is this sticking around? Like this is different this time around. There's something unique, or there's something, this feels different. Why is this sleep issue sticking around? When did that happen, and why do you think that was?
Yeah, for some reason, I just became really focused on it, and it seemed like the more attention that I gave to it, then the worse it got. If I would have just blown it off and didn't worry about it, I probably would have been fine. But yeah, no, I really became like determined to overcome this, and then I think, yeah, the harder I tried, the worse it got.
Yeah. Was it kind of like was it just like after those first couple of nights that you started to really like get more concerned and look for solutions? Or like, I'm just curious how long this sleep disruption was going on for before you figured out, well, there's something a little bit different going on this time around, and that's when all that, extra attention, all that extra focus happened.
Yeah, maybe a couple weeks, something like that.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, I don't know. I remember because at that time I really didn't know much about sleep. So I remember thinking, like, what happens? Like, is this can this just like keep going on until I just collapse or something? Like, I didn't know what to expect. So
Mm.
yeah, I don't know, just yeah, I just worried about it a lot, which just made it worse, of course.
So, what kind of things? I'm curious to hear what kind of things you'd tried in response. So, this sleep issue stuck around for a couple of weeks, and that's when we start to think, okay, that we got to fix this problem now. So we're completely understandably gonna put more attention on our sleep. Those of us who have made this journey and have put the insomnia behind us can recognize that it is a lot of that attention that we gives insomnia is often what feeds it, what gives it that oxygen that it needs to survive. But when we're caught up in a struggle, when we're struggling with something, it's understandable we want to fix it, and part of that fixing process is usually attention and effort. But unfortunately, sleep just doesn't tend to respond well to those things. So I'm just curious to hear what kind of things you tried initially, after those couple of weeks. What kind of techniques or things did you try to improve your situation?
Yeah, I think I tried, like the same stuff that everybody probably tries. Uh, like tea, like the sleepy time tea, and like melatonin. Um, you know, like the just because people, like friends, family, coworkers, like everybody's like trying to give me advice and help, but they don't really know what to do. So, I'm just trying everything that, like, everybody's like, oh, well, yeah, melatonin, that worked for me, or, something, or essential oils. That was another thing that I tried that, it just, like, like the kind you put on your skin or something. It's like it's supposed to relax you. They got something for everything. But yeah. Oh, and I started seeing a therapist too at one point. Just for like treating anxiety. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, none. It just wasn't what I needed, I guess.
I'm curious to hear if you found, when you tried all these things, when people are telling you, oh, this worked for me, try this, or maybe you're looking on Dr. Google and Google is suggesting that you try this, and then when those things don't work, a lot of the time they can kind of feed that worry and that anxiety and that fear, because then you start to perhaps think that there is something like really uniquely wrong with your sleep, because after all, if all these things are working for other people, why aren't they working for me? Is that something you experience?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, the level of worry and anxiety about this was just like unbelievable. I mean, I just yeah, I mean, I was just imagining, like what, like what's going to happen to me, I'm like, and be so sleep deprived that I won't even be able to function, I don't know. I just really was starting to go off the deep end, all that.
I believe that before we started working together, you did you end up getting prescribed some sleeping pills or sleep supplements, something like that? What was that experience like? Did you find that helpful, even if only in the short term? Or
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I got my doctor gave me a prescription for trazodone, which is a really popular medication for sleep. Yeah, I remember I didn't like it. At first, I was trying to avoid drugs because yeah, I just really wanted to, you know, didn't want to go down that road. But eventually, I mean, I just got so desperate, I started with the like over the counter stuff, like ZQL and stuff, and which actually helped for a little while, but you know, once I started having issues again, then like, well, now what do I do? And then then I broke down and started taking the trazodone, but even that would only help temporarily.
I think you mentioned one of the pitfalls that we can experience when we take medication or supplements or rely on anything external to our own like sleep mechanisms, so to speak, is that we can experience that kind of short-term relief, which is great, and for many people it can be really helpful. But then if we ever experience like a difficult night when we're using that thing, that external thing, then it can generate this like kind of return, that flood of all that worry and stress and anxiety that, oh, I took that thing that was helping and now that's not even working, and it can just create its own fresh set of problems, which can be a huge part of the frustration.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, yeah, you get to a point where like, well, I've tried everything. Like, I don't know what to do now. And that's not a good feeling.
So let's move forward a little bit. When we started to work together, one of the first changes that you made was, a lot of the stuff that we do when we're working together is behavioral in nature, because a lot of all the things that we do to try and improve our sleep, to try and get rid of that wakefulness, is, it's completely well intentioned and it even sounds logical a lot of the time. But much of the time it can end up actually perpetuating that sleep disruption. And one of the common things that we do when we're really trying to chase sleep is we spend more time in bed. We might go to bed earlier or we might stay in bed later. We might try napping during the day. And I think when we started working together, you were averaging, less than 5 hours of sleep, but spending about 7 hours in bed. So you started to kind of rein that in a little bit and a little bit less time for sleep. Can you tell us a little bit more about that change that you made?
Yeah, I think that was really helpful, actually. That might have been one of the most helpful things, now that I think about it. Yeah, I remember, forget what my sleep window was when we started working together, but yeah, because I started noticing an improvement very quickly. I remember that. Yeah, that second week when I started implementing the sleep restriction or bedtime restriction, I think I started noticing an improvement just that week, and just
Wow.
got better from there.
First and foremost, I think it's great that you experienced that change so quickly. I think of all the clients I've worked with, you are probably one of the quickest, to notice a change, just from implementing that sleep window. Just allotting an amount of time for sleep that's a bit closer to the current reality of the sleep that you were getting at that time. Why do you feel that was so helpful and so quickly? Was it just because you noticed, a return of a strong sense of sleepiness rather than it just being exclusively fatigue and grogginess at night? Or like, I'm just curious to hear why you feel that you got those results and what changed when you just started to go to bed later.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, I mean, I remember just, I guess, just being genuinely sleepy, instead of trying to, well, because at that point I was still taking the medication.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I remember starting to noticing that, the difference between, the feeling you get when you take drugs like that, as opposed to, natural sleep, and yeah, I remember noticing that pretty early on, and that maybe helped the my anxiety or worry, sleep worry, a little bit there.
Another change that you made, a little bit later on, whilst we were still working together, was just a change in how you would respond to nighttime wakefulness, whether it was you'd go to bed and find it was taking you a long time to fall asleep, or if you'd wake during the night and find it really hard to fall asleep. Instead of forcing yourself to stay in bed, tossing and turning, not feeling good, feeling frustrated, worried, anxious, trying to make sleep happen. Instead, you just kind of thought to yourself, all right, well, I'm awake anyway. Let's just do something to make being awake a bit more pleasant. Can you tell us a little bit more about that process and that change that you made?
Yeah, that was yeah, like another thing that was really helpful. Um uh because that's one of the issues that I'm pretty sure I had was, what you call a conditioned arousal, where I had spent so much time lying in bed, you know, tossing and turning that I had trained my brain to associate the bed with anxiety and frustration instead of, sleep. And one of the things that was like a key for me was coming up with an out of bed activity, which is like ideally something quiet and relaxing. Um, and the first thing I thought of was drawing because that's something I do. Uh, so, so I started doing that, and and I guess the thing that was really great about that is not only was it something I enjoyed doing, so I didn't mind getting out of bed to do it. And also, that's another thing I remember that I can't remember if it was from the course or it was like from one of your videos, but you talked about like quality of sleep, how, as you start to sort of condense your sleep into a shorter sleep window, there's a tendency for the quality to improve, like you get more deep sleep. And I started to experience that. And yeah, it wasn't, again, it happened really relatively quick for me. I mean, I didn't have to even practice that technique very long before I just started sleeping. And I mean, it got better and better.
Yeah, yeah. I think I think the reason I like these two techniques, just allotting an appropriate amount of time for sleep, and just making any unpleasant nighttime wakefulness more pleasant, is because it really just gets to what insomnia is all about. And it is basically just this strong desire that we have, completely understandable desire, but that strong desire to just avoid nighttime wakefulness. We don't want to be awake, we want to be asleep. And the more we kind of crave sleep, the more we want to really avoid being awake at night, the more the brain might think that, wow, wakefulness must be a threat. It must be this physical danger or a threat that's going to harm us. So I've got to be
Yeah.
alert to protect you from that, because my number one job as your brain is to protect you. So when we implement a sleep window, for example, we give ourselves an earliest possible bedtime, a consistent out of bedtime in the morning. We're no longer chasing after sleep by going to bed a lot earlier than we might otherwise, or staying in bed later to try and grab a few more minutes of sleep or an extra hour or so of sleep. And with the idea of kind of getting out of bed or just doing something else during the night, if the brain kind of learns that not all nighttime wakefulness has to be awfully unpleasant nighttime wakefulness, there are things we can do to make it a bit more pleasant, then that also chips away, at that brain's belief that being awake at night is a threat, is a danger. So we're no longer chasing sleep. We're no longer enduring so much unpleasant nighttime wakefulness. It all kind of helps the brain learn that, oh, okay, maybe this wakefulness, although it's not what we really want, it's not a danger. So I don't have to activate all that fight or flight mechanism to try and protect you from wakefulness, which, we can recognize when the body is activating its fight or flight response, it's probably not going to be good conditions for sleep at that time. Just before I move on, I'm curious to hear if, when we were working together, if there were any other kind of techniques or ways of thinking that you picked up on that you feel contributed to, being able to move on from insomnia, to put all that behind you.
Yeah. I mean, I think I may have mentioned this earlier, but yeah, one of the things that really resonated with me was, um, something that you talked about as far as the way that we respond to, you know, sleep or insomnia. Uh, yeah, that's just something, because even though I sleep very well most of the time, I mean, there's an off night. So, that's something I learned is just to not worry about it, and just it's not a big deal, and I just kind of bounce right back and everything's fine. And I think that's one of the things that maybe separates somebody who just has a bad night's sleep and somebody who where it becomes a continual issue and becomes chronic.
Yeah. How do we get to that point though? I think many of us can realize that it is really that response that might be making things more difficult in our lives. The worry, the anxiety, the frustration, the stress, how we feel the next day, all of that stuff. And a lot of us can probably recognize that if we are able to let that go, not only will we probably feel better, but we'll probably also sleep better. But how do we actually get to that point?
So for me, I mean, and this was like I think the first thing in the course was like the sleep education, just learning and how sleep works, and I mean, and just the basic stuff, sleep drive, circadian rhythm, uh, was it the arousal system, like just understanding those things and how they all work and kind of work together. That helped me a lot. Just that, just knowing, I don't have to worry like this is going to go on forever. I mean, that right there helped relieve a lot of the worry and anxiety for me.
I think education is really helpful, because there are a lot of ideas that we might have about how sleep should be or how it should work, that really can kind of feed into all our worries and our anxieties about sleep when we are experiencing sleep disruption. Um, I think I think most of all, what it helps do is it just eliminates the mystery behind everything, because when we're struggling, we want to know why. And when we don't know why, that's when we kind of end up down the rabbit hole of looking for solutions, doing all of that research, and it can kind of consume us. When we kind of lift that veil of mystery and we start to have answers for everything that's going on, and we realize that there's no real mystery to it. These things are happening understandably, predictably, and they're all normal. I think that can just be so helpful. And it sounds like that was what really helps contribute to your that change in your own mindset.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. It helped me kind of just see the bigger picture and understand how it all fits together, you know.
Did you find that when you were kind of caught up in that struggle, were you finding that everything that comes with it, the difficult thoughts, the difficult feelings, the fatigue, all that stuff, were you finding that it was kind of influencing your daytime behaviors, like the kind of activities you might engage in, the things you might plan for, the things you might do?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I actually had some vacation plans with a friend of mine that I canceled because I was like, I got to deal with this and, do, like I'm just, I didn't feel up to it or whatever, but, which was, now I understand that was a complete wrong way to approach things. But, at the time, I didn't understand.
I think it's important to recognize that it's normal and natural that we're going to want to kind of cancel plans or, withdraw from things when we're dealing with struggle and we're dealing with challenge and dealing with pain. That's normal.
Hmm.
But usually, I mean, sometimes it can be helpful. Sometimes we've got to look out for ourselves and do what's right for us, and that might mean taking a rest day, taking some time off, just some self care, some self compassion when we're going through struggle. But what can sometimes happen is it just kind of consumes us and we end up just really withdrawing and just moving away from doing all the things that help us live the kind of life we want to live. So something might be really important to us, like socializing with friends. That might be like a really important value for us. And we start to cancel those plans or not meet up with friends and isolate ourselves. And that doesn't tend to make us sleep better. It usually doesn't help us feel better either because we're then living a life that's not aligned with our values. We're just not living the kind of life we want to live. So I think that trying to commit to some kind of behaviors that are aligned with our values, even when we're really caught up in a struggle, can be helpful. They don't have to be huge things, Maybe we're not quite ready for that round the world cruise yet or something, or like a 1 year backpacking trip around the world.
Yeah.
But maybe we're not even ready to go out to restaurants or bars, but maybe instead, if, for example, socializing is important for us, maybe we can just pick up the phone and just talk to some friends.
Mhm.
Just do some things, even if they're just baby steps that are just aligned with our values, so that we're maybe separating our actions a little bit from all the difficult stuff that's going on inside of us. And I think the more we can do that, the more we can separate the difficult thoughts, feelings, and emotions from our own actions can be really helpful because then all those thoughts, feelings, and emotions, they're still there. We can't get rid of them, not over the long term. They're always going to be with us for as long as we're human beings, but maybe they'll have less of an influence over our lives that isn't helpful, an influence that leads to behaviors that aren't going to help us live the kind of life we want to live. How did you approach that? Were you just, I just find it interesting because I have some clients that are just like, I'm just going to force myself to live the life as though I got the greatest night of sleep every single day. And others are just like,
Oh,
gotta take tiny, teeny baby steps. I'm curious to hear, where you were on that. How were you able to go from, canceling plans, withdrawing from the kind of life you want to live to maybe just breaking that connection between sleep and what you do? What was your process there?
oh, yeah. Yeah, I guess for me it was, I mean, because before I didn't realize that that avoiding things and canceling things was, I didn't understand that that was not helpful, and you know, probably working against me in a way. So yeah, I guess it was more, more that learning process and starting to understand, that that doing things that actually want to do is, good, not, good thing, and would actually help me in a way that I didn't realize before.
So was it just a case of, this is the stuff I used to do, I'm just going to start doing it again? Did you just slowly start integrating the good stuff back into your days? Or was it just a case of, right, from now on, I'm just not going to allow this to control my actions during the day?
Yeah, I think once I started to understand that I shouldn't allow those things to, derail my life, then yeah, I just kind of went in the opposite direction.
Yeah. And did you find that was difficult at first? Maybe like you were still kind of struggling with sleep and you felt pretty fatigued during the day. Was it kind of difficult to motivate yourself to do that during the day? Or was it just as soon as you started to do it, you just immediately felt all the better for it?
No, I don't think it was really difficult. I mean, because, I mean, my whole way of looking at things changed.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Like, when you change your perspective on something, how different you can feel about everything. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was really, yeah, just really positive experience actually.
Wow, that's great. And so I think it was maybe like a year and a half or so that we actually stopped working together.
Hmm.
How have things been going since in that like year and a half? In that year and a half, have you found that when we stopped working together, there were maybe your sleep carried on improving, or did it kind of stay about the same? What have things been like for you over that time?
Oh yeah, over time, sleep just got better and better. Yeah, I mean, gradually, but yeah, definitely, you know, uh, just kept improving for quite a while. It just gradually got better and better.
I'm always curious to hear just because, some clients they make progress really quickly, just within the first couple of weeks, they notice really positive improvements. Some clients takes a little bit longer. Some clients, they don't really notice much improvement at all, but then they
Hmm.
somehow get this light bulb moment or they make some kind of breakthrough after we're no longer working together because they're carrying on practicing what they've been learning, and it is a
Okay.
process. And for some people, it takes us longer. Some people, the process isn't quite as long. Um, but the reason why I love all this stuff that we talk about on the podcast is that really it's skills based. It's about learning new ways of thinking, about exploring our relationship with our thoughts and our emotions. And it's about that it's about implementing behaviors that are going to help set the stage for sleep and help us just move toward the kind of life we want to live independently of sleep. And these are all things that we can control. They're all actions, they're all skills. So they're with us for life. And I think they are really helpful over the long term, not just at first. It's not like a quick fix. So it can take time for us to notice results, but those results kind of set us up for the rest of our lives. Just because we're armed with that knowledge, like you touched upon, we have that education. We know why things are happening. There's no more mystery. And if we ever experience that sleep disruption again in the future, we now have experience. We know that we can get through it, and we know all the stuff that is helpful and all the stuff that's not helpful. And so I do often see clients that tell me that their biggest improvements occurred once we stopped working together, and they're just practicing this stuff by themselves. And they notice that they continue to enjoy improvements. And then maybe there's some sleep disruption. There's some ups and downs because we all have difficult nights from time to time. But we know exactly how to respond now. So the way we respond is completely different. And our response is often a lot more constructive by this point. So, like you touched upon earlier, those difficult nights don't have to mean that this is going to stick around for weeks, months, years. Now we might be in a place where we recognize, okay, I had a difficult night. that doesn't have to mean that insomnia is back and I'm going to be struggling again, because I'm just in a whole different place now.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. One thing I was going to say that was pretty significant for me because when I was working with you, I was still taking the medication, and by the end of the course, I realized I didn't need it anymore. So yeah, that was kind of like a big step for me because I mean, back then I was, I had this like it was probably more of just like a psychological dependency I had on. I was like, I got to take something, I can't just go to bed without taking anything. So getting over that was a really big deal for me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What was your process with that? Did you just get to a point where you thought, I don't think I need this anymore, or was it like a tapering off plan, or like what did you do?
Yeah, I did. I got a pill cutter and like tapered off. I probably didn't need to, but I don't know. That's what I did. But it was really, yeah. I mean, once I decided to do that, I mean, I was off like really quick. But I mean, it probably was all in my head anyway. I probably never needed that stuff in the first place. So I could have, I'm sure I could have stopped any time, but I had that idea in my head that I got to take something. I can't just go to bed without taking something to, you know, try and knock myself out or something. So that was really, big thing for me.
When did you engage in that process of just moving away from the medication? Was it whilst we were still working together, or was it like when we were done working together and you just decided to make that change?
It was right at the end of the course.
Sometimes I have people that feel like they have to choose. Do I engage in behavior change and exploring all this relationship with everything that's going on inside me? Or do I do the medication? How do I choose which one? But the truth
Yeah,
is, we don't have to choose. We can do both at the same time if that's what we feel comfortable with. I've had clients that, like yourself, they're on the medication whilst we're working together, and then they make a decision at some point to move away, and that's fine. I have other clients that stop immediately. After talking to their doctor, they stop or they taper before or during when we're working together. It really doesn't make a difference. It's not an either or choice we have to make. I think there's value in learning these skills regardless of whether we're taking medication or not. And then the medication is something that clients can explore themselves whenever they feel ready to do so, just like you did.
yeah, yeah. I remember like before I started the course, I remember thinking that I was going to have to, I was a little hesitant. I was like, "Oh, I'm probably going to have to give up my sleep meds," and I was like feeling anxious about that. But then I remember you saying like, "Oh, it's something you take every night, then you can just keep doing that." And, it doesn't matter. But yeah, but that was that was a big deal because yeah, I didn't want to you know, be on pills for the rest of my life.
In this year and a half that you've kind of been on your own, so to speak, I'm guessing that you've had some difficult nights every now and then. What's your reaction now to when you have a difficult night, and how has that changed compared to the past?
Oh yeah, I just don't worry about it. I mean, I understand it's normal and it's not a big deal. So I just go on with my day and don't let it bother me. And then, next night I bounce right back. It's no problem.
The reason I like asking about that is because we have to be realistic that there are still going to be some difficult nights from time to time, right? Because as human beings, we're going to have difficult nights from time to time. There's nothing we can do about that. No one has
Yeah.
a great night of sleep every single night.
Right.
But I think the change is we become more resilient to it when it happens. And like you said, that response is different now. Instead of it generating all these really difficult thoughts and feelings and emotions and maybe influencing our behaviors in a way that's not going to help us live the kind of life we want to live. Now we're just kind of more
Mhm.
accepting that we had a difficult night. We can't control sleep. Maybe there is a return of some difficult thoughts, some difficult feelings, some difficult emotions there. But now we got that resilience to more flexibly respond to them. We realize that we've got options in how we respond to them. And
Yeah.
we can respond in ways that are helpful, and we can respond in ways that are less helpful. And often the brain screams at us to do the less helpful stuff. But if we can just take a step back, pause for a second, we always get to decide how we respond. And really, it is, like you've been talking about, it's our response that really determines how tangled up or not we might get in that struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because there's, after I, completed the course, I mean, I remember there was a lot of nights where I, still had some of that worry, like, oh, I wonder if I'm gonna, be able to sleep tonight or something, but then I still slept, even though I was like had some of that worry. Um, and then, over time it, became less and less. But yeah, now it's just don't worry about it. It's no big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you made. That we can still feel that worry or anxiety or whatever, but we can still sleep. That doesn't have to be a barrier to sleep. I think what the real barrier to sleep often is our natural human desire not to experience worry, anxiety, and all those difficult emotions because they don't feel good, right? So when we feel them, our natural inclination is to try and push them away. Or before we feel them, we want to avoid them. So we're just doing all we can to try and get rid of it.
Right.
And I think that's what the real struggle is when we get engaged in that battle. That's what really can make sleep more difficult. It's not necessarily their presence, but it's our struggle with them. All right, Eric, I'm really grateful for the time you've taken out of your day to come onto the podcast, but I do have one last question for you,
Hmm.
and it's this. If someone with chronic insomnia is listening and they feel as though they've tried everything, that they're beyond help, that they just can't do anything to improve their sleep, what would you tell them?
Here's the thing, like feel like I had it as bad as anybody could possibly have it. I mean, my level of sleep related worry and anxiety and everything was, I mean, it was just ridiculous. So if somebody who was like as screwed up as I was can recover, I mean, like really recover, then I mean, it seems like there's got to be hope for anybody, right? I mean, if I can do it, I think anybody can do it.
That's great. All right. Well, Eric, again, thanks again for taking the time out of your day to come onto the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thanks for all your help. Really, really means a lot to me.
Thank you.